Hello, and welcome to Vision Denial and World Watch 2022. My name is Sam, and if those of you who are new here, I have watched every single playoff of 2022. Yes, every single one of them, even that one. Notably, this particular series we were covering the summer of 2022 on our anticipation and preparation for Worlds. And this you have stumbled upon, or you are a regular subscriber and watcher, to the Meet the Teams portion, where I will take a look at every 24 team, their strengths, weaknesses, play styles, notable quirks, interesting things to look ahead, all in the attempts to at least teach some people who don't watch certain regions what to expect from their teams, or from the teams that are going. That said, there are two caveats to really put forward. First caveat: a lot of the things that I'm going to be talking about are data-driven. I will put a link down below to the Google Docs of all of the data I have aggregated all in one nice spot. All of the data comes from the LOL fandom, Wikipedia, and from the goal.gg website, both of which have very different focuses to their data points, and both are necessary for these kinds of videos to work. That said, there's a limitation to some of this data because the LPL doesn't send the data as consistently as the other regions, and this is something you'll find with any particular data point for LoL esports globally. The LPL will still be missing some things regarding plates, drakes at 15 minutes, and heralds. A lot of their early game is not there. That and everything relating to vision. Second thing that I have to point out, a lot of the emerging regions, specifically Oceania, Turkey, Brazil, Latin America, and Japan, their teams will have some inflated stats in their favor. That being in mind, when we're looking at their stats, a lot of them will look good, notably the Chiefs and Detonation Focus Me. So some of the stats for every team has to be taken with a grain of salt of either being maybe stronger than expected or weaker than expected by quite a bit, notably because of this kind of inflation of statistics. When you're studying data, this is the kind of adjustments you need to do. That said, team-based data will look skewed. Individual data for each player's less so, because of the kinds of data points that they keep track of. All of that to say is that a lot of the notes that I've taken are using data points that have been collected that you can all enjoy for free down below, or in the various websites that I mentioned, but taking into account a lot of the personal notes that I use in conjunction with this data to show you what to expect with these teams. Without further ado, let's take a look at this video's team. I don't know. This is a pre-recorded message. Let's take a look. Let's meet Saigon Buffaloes. The second team out of the Vietnamese VCS are the 11th team to qualify for the World Championships after beating GAM Esports 3-2, but then losing the first slot possibility by losing to GAM Esports 3-0. The Buffaloes, let's meet their coach, right? Ren here has been part of the Vietnamese region's whole scene since 2015, being anywhere between a top laner and a mid laner, before finally settling with the Buffaloes as their coach in 2018, in the summer of the 2018. The Buffaloes make for an interesting case study because they don't square anywhere below average or above average. They sit nicely in the middle. There's a good, solid approach to the early game where they really push their advantages as much as possible, but have an inconsistent set of vision when it comes to the entirety of the game. And then, because of that, they make weird positional errors. Honestly, the Buffaloes have so much going for them that's very impressive. Their coordination for team fighting can be incredibly solid, but then many of them get caught out on a frequent basis. Their laning phase in and of itself is fairly consistent, but once we leave laning phase, the coordination still just comes to a lack of preparation. The Buffaloes understand one style of play, and once they've been bested into it, then they just kind of fall apart at that point. I don't expect them to be terrible, but I also don't expect much for them. Let's meet the top laner of Saigon Buffaloes, Hasmed. Hasmed has been honestly part of the Saigon Buffalo since the beginning of the 2019 season, where he was a substitute bottom laner, and then eventually transitioning to top lane full time at this point for nearly 4 years. And he particularly has an interesting style of just being up there side laning, playing weak side. Notice the intonation of air quotes. Because he split pushes. His kill participation and his KDA are incredibly low for somebody in his role. But then you look at his CS per minute, his gold per minute, his kill share, and his gold share, and they are amongst top 10, if not top 5 at any given point. And while this is super impressive, he does bring a lot of pressure to him and creates a lot of chaos amongst his opponents. It silently concerns me that the vast majority, and I do mean the vast majority of his games, out of 27, out of, what was it again? It was, as I pull it up, out of 47 games, 23 of them are on Gwen or Aatrox. There's a very narrow focus onto his approach, and while he does bring a lot of pressure and he is effective at doing so, I'm just wondering whether or not there is a large room to punish his very risky play. Meet the jungler of Saigon Buffalo, BeanJ. BeanJ made his debut in the 2021 season with Saigon Buffalo, and he has a fairly mixed record. BeanJ has this appropriate avenue of really finding any possible moment to gank early in and pushing the envelope early game. That said, he then becomes a little bit more passive as time goes on, and this is well reflected in his kill participation. Now granted, his team does have a very sporadic and spread out view on how they approach the game, but he doesn't have the highest kill participation on his team, despite the fact that he is one of the biggest initiators for them. BeanJ accrues above average, but only slightly so for many of the stats, and amongst a lot of different junglers who will bring the pressure and non-stop, it doesn't seem to stand out as much. But sometimes you don't need to stand out. Sometimes you just need to be that go button when necessary. And BeanJ usually is that person to press the button. Meet the mid laner of Saigon Buffaloes, Froggy. Froggy here has been, quite honestly, a very strong utility mid laner. He made his debut in the Saigon Buffaloes for the 2021 season and has made, or the 2020 summer season, and extending it throughout since, really playing something proactive. Proactive in the sense that he's usually playing utilities to create zone. His stats themselves look like he's really bottom of the barrel and bottom of the pack. Low gold per minute, low kill share, low gold share compared to many of his contemporaries. And his kill participation is the highest, however, for his team. He's really looking for angles at any given moment to set up any team fight that will allow Shogun, Hasmed, and BeanJ to really take over the scene. Froggy may not, by any intents and purposes, be the strongest mid laner, but he is one who, on any angle, services the needs and benefits of his team first and foremost, and his own gold track second. And honestly, commendable from Froggy. We'll just have to see whether or not this actually can translate super well against some of the other incredibly terrifying mid laners. Meet the bot laner of Saigon Buffaloes, Shogun. Shogun over here has been, and I cannot state, one of the best roster moves for this team. Having been a substitute during the 2021 summer for Saigon Buffaloes, transitioning him to the main roster for the 2022 season has done wonders for this team. He is an incredibly prolific team fighter, and there are going to be some contradictions happening within his stats. His gold per minute, CS per minute, and gold share mark among the top 5, if not number 1, especially for CS per minute, amongst his contemporaries. But his KDA and his kill share are some of the lowest. He's a fairly aggressive fighter. If he can quell some of that particular aggression and possibly play a smidgen safer, just a little bit, we could have an international star in the making. He continuously fights and finds times to find fights without giving up any moment for gold. And frankly, fantastic. The only difference here is that because of it, he also is very limited in terms of the champion pool he has. He plays 14 champions, yes, but the vast majority of them are from Aphelios and Sivir. It's very hard for me to really think, yes, rising star, but not have the same kind of confidence that he'll actually be able to follow through on this if he's easily targetable. Nonetheless, he is a player to watch out for. Meet the support player for Saigon Buffaloes, Taki. Taki has been part of the organization since the 2021 season, or previously being part of their academy in the 2020 season. He, how do I put this, has the second most amount of champions under his belt, right after Carrier. That's wild. 20 champions is a really wild thing to put here. And honestly, he plays with very little gold overall. He's super effective as the support player for Saigon Buffaloes. But all of those champions does not equal consistency. And how else? There is a certain level of recklessness to Taki's playstyle. And granted, this is totally normal for the way that they play. The disjointed nature and chaotic approach to their early game aggression requires that you are often throwing yourself to your enemy to give the kind of space that is necessary. But this tends to result into low kill participation, fairly sub-average KDA, and his high champion score, or his high champion numbers, indicate mostly that Saigon Buffaloes really play to a number of styles and will really throw anything at their opponents to get the early game going and consistently. Taki is a Swiss Army knife disguised as a support player. For all of the interesting early game approaches that Saigon Buffalo bring, and some of the more aggressive and very talented team fighting approaches and angles that they also offer, whilst having also the ability to just kind of play the sidelines consistently, means, however, it really just disappoints more though when they don't actually pull it off. Their early game approach does catapult them fairly frequently, but if they don't ever get a hold of that early game, then they just kind of look lost. And with so many teams who are so excellent in the early game and are equally excellent in the late game, or have teams that are way better at playing from behind in the late game, I don't see Saigon Buffaloes getting very far. And taking a look at who they're up against in the play-in stage, they're in the same group as DRX, Royal Never Give Up, Mad Lions, Istanbul, Wildcats, and Isurus, all teams who are either going to really approach the early game incredibly well or play towards the late game in a really scary manner. There is a part of me that thinks there is a chance that they could make it out of the play-ins, like an inkling of a chance. But if I look at who they would face off against in the group stage, I'd say they're pretty hopeless at that point. There's like a lot of style and panache from this team. Their personality really oozes out into their gameplay. They have this sort of this just kind of like this mojo, such strong mojo out of them. And quite honestly, just from the look of them, it's easy to try to like maybe brush them off and underestimate them. But even Ren, the coach's motto, Vietnamese players are as good as others in other region. And you know what? That's the mentality they bring forth in every game. They are as good as you, and they'll prove it. Those are my thoughts, though. That's based off of all the playoffs that I've seen and the stats that I got in front of me. I want to hear what you have to think about. Do you think that Saigon Buffaloes have a chance to make the great march of play-ins to finals? Or do you think at some point they're going to taper off, not able to really like pull out the win during the play-in stage to make it to groups? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. I'll also have videos and playlists on the side of all of the different playoffs that I've watched, my reviews of them in Supercuts, my thoughts over the last 7 weeks regarding how I've interpreted these, the other teams that have qualified, and you'll get to watch a video of how they made it through with all the Vietnamese playoffs. And if you like this kind of content, like and subscribe. I really appreciate all of you who have watched. It means a heck of a lot to me. And with that, I guess I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.